My wife asked for a divorce. I want everything except the son. My lawyer begged me to fight. I said, give it all to her. The courtroom went silent. At the final hearing, I signed everything over. She smiled until her lawyer screamed. My wife stared at the judge and said she wanted everything. House, car, savings, just not our son. I told my lawyer, give it all to her. The courtroom went silent. For a second, I could hear the old ceiling fan in the hallway outside the courtroom clicking like a loose blade on a summer porch. Even the bass stopped shifting his weight. Judge Klein's pen hovered over the paperwork like it had forgotten how to move. Linda sat up straight in her navy blazer, hair done the way she wore it for Facebook photos. Smooth, bright, not a strand out of place. She didn't look at me like a wife who'd spent 27 years watching me come home with concrete dust on my boots. She looked at me like I was an outdated appliance she'd finally decided to replace. On her side of the table, her attorney, Maureen, tilted her chin with that quiet confidence lawyers get when they think the math is simple. House, cars, accounts, retirement, and the one thing Linda didn't want to deal with, as she put it, our son Evan. My attorney Tom Berlin leaned toward me so close I could smell his peppermint gum. He whispered through his teeth. Rick, this is insane. She's overreaching. We fight this. I didn't turn my head. I kept my eyes on the corner of the table where someone had scratched a tiny heart into the wood years ago. I felt the weight of the courtroom, the way you feel the weight of a roof when you're standing in an attic. Everything above you held up by beams you can't see. No, I said. Tom's eyebrows jumped. Give it all to her, I repeated, calm enough that my own voice surprised me, like I was ordering coffee. Linda's lips twitched. Not quite a smile, more like satisfaction, like she'd finally gotten what she believed she deserved. Judge Klein cleared his throat. Mr. Holloway, I need to be sure you understand what you're agreeing to. I understand, I said. Because I did. People think a building inspector spends his life looking for problems in other people's houses. Rotten joists, cracked foundations, mold creeping along a basement wall like a quiet confession. But the truth is, after 30 years in the job, you can't turn that eye off. You walk into your own kitchen and you notice the floor dips a little near the fridge. You see the hairline crack along the drywall and you tell yourself, it's nothing, just settling. That's what I did with my marriage for years. Judge Klein looked down at the file again. And you are also agreeing that your wife will retain the marital residence at 21 and 48, Renwood Drive, the vehicles, and the bulk of the joint assets. You will retain personal property as listed and primary custody of your son, Evan Holloway. Linda made a small sound like a laugh swallowed back. Evan was 19. Technically, the court didn't have to decide custody the way it would for a little kid, but Linda had made her position clear anyway, right there on the record, like she couldn't help herself. Everything except the son. That line didn't just land in the courtroom. It landed in my chest. Evan wasn't a couch you could haul out and replace when it didn't match your new look. He wasn't a box you could drop off at Goodwill because you were chasing a different life. But Linda had already decided he didn't fit the picture she wanted to post. Judge Klein's gaze softened for half a second, and I saw the human behind the robe. Mr. Holloway, he said slower now. Is anyone pressuring you into this agreement? I looked at Linda finally. Her eyes were dry, steady, beautiful the way they always were, even when she was being cruel. No, Your Honor, I said. No one's pressuring me. I signed the page they slid across the table. The pen felt heavier than it should have. Not because it was hard to write my name, because of everything that name had meant, years of building something, fixing things, paying bills on time, trying to do right by my family. Linda watched my hand move like she was watching money transfer between accounts. When I finished, I set the pen down gently, like it could break if I dropped it. The hearing wasn't the end. Not really. It was a door closing, and I'd already walked through it in my head months ago because this didn't start in that courtroom. It started 8 months earlier at 2:07 in the morning with a blue glow from Linda's phone lighting up our kitchen like a police siren. Back then, I still slept in the same bed as her. Still believed our life. Plain steady Ohio normal was solid enough to last. I'd gotten up for water. It wasn't dramatic, just the way you do at 56 knees complaining bladder. Not as patient as it used to be. I padded down the hall in my socks past the frame photos. Evan at 8 holding a bluegill at Cedar Creek Lake. Linda and me at a Dayton Dragons game, sunburned and smiling. The kind of photos that make you think you know someone. The kitchen was dark except for that phone light. Linda was at the table, hunched over, thumbs moving fast. She didn't hear me at first. The air smelled faintly like her face cream lavender, expensive something she'd started buying. After she found herself on Facebook groups full of women talking about reinvention, I stopped in the hallway, not trying to spy, just pausing because the way she held herself looked secretive, tight, like she was trying to keep something from spilling. The message on the screen wasn't hard to read from where I stood. Big white letters on a black background. Can't wait to have my own play stage. You're going to look unstoppable. Then another one. Once you're free, you won't have to drag dead weight around anymore. Dead weight. My throat went dry. My heart did that stupid thing where it tries to punch its way out of your ribs. Linda smiled at the screen. Not a polite smile. A real one, the kind I hadn't seen aimed at me in a long time. I backed up without making a sound, then turned and walked back down the hall like my legs belonged to someone else. In the bathroom, I stared at myself in the mirror. I looked like what I was, an older guy with crow's feet graying at the temple's shoulders, still broad from a lifetime of carrying ladders and tool bags, but with a tiredness around the eyes you can't scrub off. I went back to bed and lay there in the dark while Linda slipped in beside me 20 minutes later, phone face down, acting like she'd just gotten a drink of water, too. She smelled like lavender and lies. The next day, I didn't confront her. That might sound weak. Maybe it was, but I've been in enough houses where people panic the minute you point at a crack. They start arguing, blaming patching with cheap filler painting over the stain. That doesn't fix the leak. So, I did what I always do. I started inspecting. Not her phone again. Not right away. I inspected the life around me. The way Linda talked, the way she dressed, the new habits that didn't match the old ones. Linda began treating our home like inventory. She called it building the business like that made everything noble. Linda's home staging side hustle started small. Just a few pieces, Rick, she'd said, waving a hand like she was shooing away a fly. People pay good money for this. It's just temporary. Temporary turned into constant. The first thing that disappeared was the nice throw blanket Evan's grandma had crocheted. Then our better lamp. Then the set of dining chairs. I tightened the bolts on myself after Evan spilled milk on them when he was 5. Our living room started to look hollow. The best couch vanished one Saturday while Evan and I were out picking up parts for my old Ford at AutoZone. When we came back, there was a cheaper love seat in its place, the kind that sags in the middle like it's given up. Evan stood there with his backpack slung over one shoulder, staring at the room. Where's the couch? Linda breezed in behind us with a grin, holding a coffee from Starbucks like she'd won a prize. It's at a client's. It's fine. This one works. Evan's eyes flicked to mine. He didn't say what I knew. He was thinking that our house was being emptied out piece by piece. And somehow Mom was acting like it was progress. I swallowed the anger because I didn't know where to put it yet. Okay, I said. As long as it comes back, Linda laughed. You worry too much. It wasn't just the couch. I started noticing boxes in the garage taped shut, labeled in Linda's handwriting. I started noticing the way our joint account dipped at odd times. Not like groceries or gas, but like somebody was buying big-ticket items in a hurry. And then I saw it. Not at 2:07 a.m., not in a secret text. I saw it in the one place you can't lie to a man like me, paperwork. The college fund statement came in the mail on a Thursday. I'd gotten home early from a site visit, an old duplex on the west side with a basement that smelled like damp cardboard. I was tired, my back stiff, and I did what I always do. I sorted the mail at the counter. The envelope was thin official. Evan's name wasn't on it, but I recognized the investment company logo. I opened it. The balance was lower. Not a little lower, thousands lower. My first thought was a mistake. A computer error, something that would get corrected. Then I saw the transaction line, neat and merciless. Transfer out. I stood in my own kitchen, the same kitchen where Linda had smiled at dead weight, and I felt something in me shift like a joist finally snapping after too much rot. That money wasn't ours. Not in the way Linda meant it. That was Evan's future. And Linda had taken it like she was borrowing a lamp. I heard the front door open. Linda's heels clicked on the tile, sharp, confident. The sound of someone who thinks she's walking into the life she deserves. I slid the statement back into the envelope and set it down. Not because I was scared of her, because for the first time, I understood exactly what she was doing. She wasn't leaving a marriage. She was stripping a house down to the studs and planning to sell the lumber. And I wasn't going to stop her by yelling. I was going to stop her the way I stop any dangerous structure from hurting the people inside it, by letting the truth carry the weight. I didn't sleep much after that night with the bank statement. That's not the right way to put it. I slept, but the way you do in a chair at a hospital, drifting in and out, never fully letting go. Every sound in the house felt louder. The refrigerator kicking on, the wind brushing the siding. Linda's breathing beside me, steady and unconcerned. In my line of work, we call it progressive failure. A structure doesn't collapse all at once. It weakens slowly, quietly, until one day the load is too much. I lay there staring at the ceiling, tracing a faint crack that ran from the corner toward the smoke detector. I'd noticed it years ago. Hairline cosmetic. Nothing worth fixing. I told myself that crack was my marriage. Linda started spending less time at home after that. Client meetings, she called them open houses. She'd leave in the late afternoon, dressed sharper than she ever did for me. Tailored jacket boots that clicked when she walked, hair done like she was stepping into a magazine spread. She stopped asking what Evan and I wanted for dinner. Sometimes she didn't come home at all. Evan noticed. Kids always do. Even when they don't say much, he and I had our routines. Saturday mornings I'd make pancakes. Nothing fancy, just box mix and too much butter. Evan would sit at the counter scrolling his phone. Hoodie half-sipped hair sticking up the way it had since middle school. One morning he asked casual but not really. Mom working again today? I flipped a pancake, watched it land a little off-center. Yeah, that's what she said. He nodded. Eyes still on his phone. Okay, that was Evan. He didn't push. He absorbed. Linda's staging business took over more space in our lives without asking permission. The garage filled with box lamps, side tables, rugs rolled tight like bodies. I moved my tools farther and farther back until I was working out of a corner. My ladder leaning against the wall like an afterthought. She started referring to things as assets, not furniture, not memories. Assets. One night, she stood in the living room, hands on her hips, surveying the bare patches where our good pieces used to be. I need the dining set next, she said. I looked up from tightening a loose hinge on the cheap cabinet she'd brought in. That table we eat on that, she sighed like I was a child. Rick, people pay for a look. I'll bring it back when he went from when I can. Evan was in the doorway, backpack on, listening. I caught his eye and shook my head just enough to say don't. I let it go again, but I started keeping track. Dates, times, which items left and didn't come back. Which withdrawals matched which purchases. Not because I wanted to trap her, because that's how my brain works. You document what you see. You don't argue with rot, you measure it. The real punch came 2 weeks later. It was a Tuesday evening, gray and cold. The kind of Ohio winter day where the sun never really shows up. Evan was at his community college late for a study group. Linda wasn't home. I had the house to myself. I sat at the kitchen table with the college fund statement spread out, a yellow legal pad beside it. I'd called the investment company that afternoon from my truck parked outside a job site. "Sir," the woman on the phone said, voice polite and distant. "The transfer was authorized by an account holder." "Which one?" I asked. There was a pause. "Mrs. Holloway." I thanked her and hung up before she could hear my voice change. Now I stared at the numbers again like they might rearrange themselves if I looked hard enough. That money wasn't a bonus. It wasn't extra. It was years of cutting corners, skipping vacations, driving cars until they rattled all so Evan would have a shot without drowning in loans. I pictured Linda picking out sofas, swiping a card, telling herself it was temporary, that she'd put it back, that she deserved it. I heard the garage door open. Linda came in, humming, cheeks pink from the cold. Carrying a bag from some boutique downtown, she froze when she saw the papers on the table. "What's that?" she asked. "College fund," I said. She set the bag down slowly. "Why are you looking at that?" "Because it's missing money," she crossed her arms. "It's an investment. It'll come back." "You took it," I said. I kept my voice level. "You took Evan's college money." Her face hardened. "Don't be dramatic. It's our money." "It's for Evan," I said. She rolled her eyes. "Evan will be fine. Kids, figure it out. Besides, this business is for all of us." That's when I knew. Not just that she'd taken the money, but that she didn't see anything wrong with it. Linda turned away, already done with the conversation. "I'm exhausted. We'll talk later." Later never came. Over the next month, the house emptied out even more. The good chairs, the coffee table I'd built myself from reclaimed wood. The spare bedroom Evan used to spread his textbooks across, now stacked with boxes labeled "Staging Do Not Touch." The place started to echo. Evan sat at the kitchen table one night, elbows propped, staring at his phone without really seeing it. "Daddy," he said. Quiet. "Are we moving?" I felt that question like a nail through my boot. "I don't know yet," I said honestly. He nodded, jaw tight. "Okay." Linda announced she wanted a divorce 3 weeks later, like she was announcing a new venture. "I'm not happy," she said, standing in the same kitchen she'd hollowed out. "I want more out of life, and I'm not going to apologize for that." She had already spoken to a lawyer, already picked out what she wanted. House, cars, accounts. I asked her one question. "What about Evan?" She waved a hand. "He's basically grown. He can stay with you." Like she was leaving behind a piece of furniture. She didn't feel like moving. That night after she went to bed, I stood alone in the living room. The cheap love seat creaked when I sat down. The walls felt farther apart than they used to. I thought about all the inspections I'd done over the years. The times I'd stood in front of owners who swore a building was fine, that the cracks didn't matter. They always say that right before something gives way. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I pulled out my phone and opened the Notes app. I titled it Renwood and I started writing everything down. The thing about Rod is that once you see it, you can't unsee it. Every inspection after that felt different. I'd be standing in some half-ornated rental on the east side, clipboard in hand, listening to a landlord swear the wiring was good enough, and all I could think about was my own house. How I'd believe the same kind of lies because they were convenient. Linda filed the paperwork a week after she said the word divorce out loud. No tears, no shouting, just signatures, and a look on her face like she was finally stepping into the life she'd been denied. I called Tom Brerislin the next morning. I'd known Tom for years. Ran into him at a VFW fish fry. Once bonded over bad coffee and worse bingo prizes, he was the kind of lawyer who still shook hands like it meant something. We met at a diner off Road 48, the kind with cracked vinyl booths and a bell that rang when the cook was ready. Tom listened while I talked. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't rush. I laid it out the way I lay out a violation report. Facts. First feelings later. When I finished, he leaned back and rubbed his chin. Rick, he said, she's asking for a lot. I know we can fight this, he said. You've got leverage, the college fund alone. I'm not here to fight. I said that stopped him. He stared at me over his coffee. Then why are you here? Because I needed to know how a building falls without taking the wrong people down with it. I told him that part without using those words. I told him about Evan, about the withdrawals, about the way Linda was moving things, signing things, treating the marriage like a storage unit she was emptying out. Tom sighed. If you push back hard now, she'll dig in. Motions, delays, fees. She'll bleed you dry before you ever see a courtroom. I nodded. That lined up with what my gut had been telling me. And if I don't, I asked. Tom hesitated. Then you might lose everything. I looked down at my hands. Thick fingers nicked and scarred from decades of work. Hands that had fixed roofs held ladders steadied Evan when he learned to ride a bike. Everything isn't everything, I said. Tom watched me for a long second. You're planning something. I'm planning not to hold up a bad structure anymore, I said. I just need to know how not to get crushed under it. That earned a slow nod. Okay, Tom said. Then we go quiet. No accusations, no theatrics. We document and we wait. Waiting is harder than fighting. Linda took my silence as surrender. I could see it in the way she talked to me. Short, dismissive, already moving on. She started spending more time downtown posting photos of projects and transformations. People commented with little fire emojis and words like boss and unstoppable. She liked those comments. I could tell. Meanwhile, I started doing what I do best. I documented. I took photos of the garage when she wasn't home. The stacks of furniture, the lamps still tagged from suppliers. I noted serial numbers the way I note appliance models in a failed inspection. I pulled bank statements and highlighted patterns, transfers that lined up with purchases, payments made from accounts that were supposed to be untouched. I didn't snoop. I didn't hack. I didn't break locks or passwords. Everything I saw was either mailed to the house or tied to accounts my name was still legally on. And then there was the storage unit. I noticed the charge one evening while balancing the checkbook. Something Linda hadn't bothered doing in years. Monthly fee, not cheap. When I asked her about it, she barely looked up from her phone. It's for overflow. Overflow of what? Inventory. She said like it should have been obvious. Rick, you don't need to know every detail. She was right. I didn't need details. I needed location. A quick search confirmed what I suspected. The unit was in an industrial strip, not zoned for commercial storage the way she was using it. Fire codes, liability issues, the kind of thing that doesn't matter until it suddenly does. I didn't report it. That part matters. I didn't call it in. I didn't flag it as an inspector. I didn't bend a single rule. I just wrote it down. Letting someone keep building on bad ground isn't the same as pushing the building over. Evan caught me one night sitting at the table, legal pad open, paper spread out. You okay? He asked. Yeah, I said. He hesitated, then sat down across from me. Mom says you're letting her take the house. I met his eyes. Is that what she said? He nodded. She said, you don't want to fight. I chose my words carefully. I'm choosing what matters. He looked at the table, then back at me. That's me, right? I reached across and squeezed his hand always. Linda filed for an expedited settlement. She wanted it fast, clean. She wanted to be done with the past before it could complicate her future. Her lawyer sent over drafts that read like a shopping list. House, cars, accounts, business interest. I didn't argue. I didn't negotiate. I agreed to almost everything with two conditions: custody of Evan, and time to review the paperwork carefully. Marla Keene called Tom irritated. Your client is being uncooperative. Tom smiled when he told me that later. She's impatient, he said. That's good for us. I spent nights going over documents with a cheap desk lamp, the kind that hums faintly. I read every line the way I read blueprints, looking for load-bearing language. Ownership, responsibility, assumption of debt. Linda was so focused on what she was getting. She didn't ask what came with it. I felt fear. Don't get me wrong. There were moments I wondered if I was wrong. If I was about to lose the house, I'd fixed up room by room the neighborhood. I knew the life I understood. But every time that doubt crept in, I'd picture Evan at that kitchen table asking if we were moving. And I'd picture Linda's voice saying everything except the sun. That's when my resolve hardened. I wasn't preparing for court. I was preparing for what came after. By the time the paperwork reached its final draft, our house didn't feel like a house anymore. It felt like a model home after the movers leave clean on the surface, empty underneath. Linda walked through it like a buyer already imagining new owners. She talked on her phone while pacing the living room heels. Clicking on the hardwood I'd refinished myself years earlier. Yes, I'll have the house by summer, she said one afternoon, not bothering to lower her voice. Rick's folding. He doesn't have the stomach for a fight. I stood in the garage pretending to organize my tools. Each word landed like a small insult, not because it hurt, but because it confirmed what I already knew. She thought this was about strength, about who blinked first. She didn't understand inspections. I began packing my things in earnest. Not furniture, she wanted that, but the items that had my hands on them. The things that carried weight no appraisal could measure. My tool belt, the hammer with a chipped handle, the level I'd used on half the houses in Montgomery County. I wrapped them carefully the way you do when you're leaving a job site for the last time. Evan hovered in the doorway, trying not to get in the way. You taking all that with us? Yeah, I said. I'll need it. For what? For starting over. He nodded. He didn't smile, but he didn't look scared either. That meant more to me than anything. The hardest room was the kitchen. Not because of the appliances or the cabinets, because of the door frame. On the inside edge in pencil and faded marker were the height marks I'd made for Evan every year. 8 years old, 10, 12. Each one dated, each one a little celebration. I ran my thumb over the highest mark. 17, the year he shot up so fast his pants never fit right. Linda walked in behind me. You're not taking that, she said like she was joking. I turned. No, I said I'm not. She shrugged. Good. It's part of the house. I stared at the marks a second longer then stepped back. Some things don't travel. They stay where they're made. That night, Evan and I ate pizza on paper plates because the good dishes were already gone. Linda was out again. I didn't ask where, Dad. Evan said, chewing slowly. Are you sure about this? I wiped my hands on a napkin. About what? Letting her take everything. I leaned back in the chair, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking clock over the sink. Sounds I'd heard for decades. No, I said. I'm not sure, but I'm sure about you. He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, that was enough. The week before the final hearing, Linda barely spoke to me, unless it was about logistics, utilities, mail forwarding, which car would be hers. She acted like she was already gone, like the paperwork was just catching up. I met Tom one last time in his office. He spread the documents out across the desk. "This is it," he said. "Once you sign, it's done." I scanned the pages landing where I knew they would. Ownership clauses, assumption of liabilities, business interest transferred in full. "You're sure?" Tom asked quietly. I thought about the storage unit, the missing money, the way Linda never once asked how Evan was handling any of this. "I'm sure," I said. The morning of the hearing, I stood in the empty living room one last time. The walls echoed when I breathed. The cheap love seat sagged under its own weight. I didn't feel anger. I felt something closer to resolve. I locked the door behind me and put the key on the counter right where Linda would find it. At the courthouse, Linda smiled when she saw me. Not kindly, confidently. I took my seat beside Tom, folded my hands, and waited. The courtroom smelled faintly of old paper and floor polish. The kind of smell that never really goes away, no matter how many cases passed through. I'd been in that building before for permit hearings and appeals, but sitting there that morning felt different. This wasn't about a roof line or a missing handrail. This was my life reduced to paragraphs and signatures. Linda sat 2 chairs down from me, legs crossed, posture perfect. She wore a light gray suit that probably cost more than my monthly truck payment. Her hair was pulled back clean the way she liked it when she wanted to look serious. She didn't look nervous. She looked ready. Mara Keene leaned in close to her, whispering something that made Linda nod and smile. I didn't need to hear it. I already knew the gist. We're about to win. Tom Berlin shuffled the papers in front of us. He glanced over at me, eyebrows raised just enough to ask the question he'd already asked 3 times that morning. "You okay?" he murmured. I nodded. "Let's finish it." Judge Clean entered, robes swaying slightly as he took a seat. The BA called the room to order and everyone stood then sat. The sound of chairs scraping echoed louder than usual. The judge adjusted his glasses and looked down at the file. "We're here to finalize the dissolution of marriage between Richard Holloway and Linda Holloway." Linda sat up a little straighter. This was her moment. Judge Clean reviewed the settlement terms out loud, his voice steady and practiced. "House on Renwood Drive to Linda, vehicles to Linda, financial accounts as outlined, business interests retained solely by Linda, personal property to be divided as listed." As he spoke, I felt each item slide away from me like a tool being set down for the last time. I didn't flinch. I'd already let go of these things in my head. "And custody of the party's son, Evan Holloway," the judge continued. "Shaw remained primarily with Mr. Holloway has agreed." Linda's jaw tightened for half a second, then it relaxed. She'd already dismissed Evan as an inconvenience she was happy to offload. Judge Klein looked up. "Mr. Holloway, do you confirm your agreement to these terms?" "I do," I said. "And Mrs. Holloway?" "Yes," Linda said, crisp and confident. The clerk slid the documents across the table toward me first. The stack was thick, the pages warm from the copier. I picked up the pen. For a brief moment, my hand hovered. Not because I didn't know what I was doing, because I did. I thought about the garage when Evan was little, him sitting on an upside-down bucket while I worked handing me screws like they were treasure. I thought about the kitchen door frame, the pencil marks. I thought about that night at 2:07 a.m. The glow of Linda's phone, the word dead weight. I signed. My name looked smaller on the page than I expected. I slid the papers back. Linda reached for them, eagerly, flipping through to make sure everything was there. When she finished signing, she handed the stack to Mara with a satisfied little sigh. It was over, or so she thought. Judge Klein stacked the documents neatly. Before I enter this into the record, he said, is there anything further from either side? Linda leaned back, arms folded, smile already forming. Mara started to shake her head. Tom stood up. Your Honor, he said. We respectfully request that the court acknowledge the attached exhibit submitted with the settlement. Linda turned sharply toward Mara. What exhibits? Mara frowned. What exhibits? The clerk handed Judge Klein a thinner folder clipped to the back of the settlement. Mara leaned forward, snatching her copy from the table. She flipped it open, eyes scanning fast. Her face changed. It wasn't dramatic at first, just a pause, a blink. The way someone looks when they realize a number doesn't add up. Linda whispered, Mara. Mara flipped another page, then another. Color drained from her face. Judge Klein adjusted his glasses again. Miss Keene. Mara stood abruptly, chair legs screeching against the floor. Your Honor, she said, voice tight. I need a moment. Linda grabbed her arm. What is it? Mara shook her off, eyes still glued to the pages. Her breathing had gone shallow quick. I sat still, hands folded, heart steady. Mara's voice rose despite herself. This changes things. Judge Klein's brow furrowed. In what way? Mara looked at Linda, then back at the judge, panic flashing across her carefully practiced composure. Your Honor, the attached documents indicate significant undisclosed liabilities tied to the business assets my client has just accepted in full. Linda's smile vanished. What are you talking about? Mara turned to her eyes wide. Linda, these reports, these transfers, these obligations, they're yours now. All of them. Linda stood. Rick, what did you do? I met her gaze calmly. I signed what you asked for. Judge Klein raised a hand. Miss Keene, lower your voice. Mara swallowed hard. Your Honor, with respect, this settlement includes acknowledgement of financial exhibits, detailing tax exposure, outstanding obligations, and potential compliance issues connected to the business assets. Mrs. Holloway insisted on retaining. The courtroom buzzed. Low murmurs, a cough. Someone in the back leaned forward. Linda shook her head, laughing sharply. That's ridiculous. You said everything was clean. Mara's voice cracked. I said what you showed me was clean. Judge Klein closed the file slowly. I will be reviewing these exhibits in detail. Linda turned to me again, her face tight with anger now. You tricked me. I shook my head. No, I stopped holding things together for you. The BA shifted his stance. The air felt heavier. Judge Klein looked from Linda to me. This court acknowledges the exhibits as part of the record. Given the information presented, there may be further proceedings regarding financial disclosure and responsibility. Linda sank back into her chair, stunned. Mara stared at the papers like they might burst into flames. And for the first time since this began, I saw it in Linda's eyes. She hadn't won. The room didn't explode the way people imagine when things go wrong in court. There was no gavel slam right away. No shouting from the gallery. Just a low spreading tension like a beam starting to groan under weight it can't carry. Mara was the first to break. She stepped away from the table. One hand pressed flat against her chest, the other clutching the papers. Her voice came out sharp and loud before she could stop it. This is a disaster, she said, then louder. This is a complete disaster. The word echoed off the walls. Judge Klein's eyes narrowed. Miss King composed herself. Mara turned back to the bench, breath hitching. Your Honor, with respect, my client has just accepted full ownership of business assets that carry substantial undisclosed liabilities, tax exposure, outstanding vendor debts, storage, and lease violations. These obligations were not disclosed to counsel in their entirety prior to execution. Linda shot to her feet. What are you saying? She demanded. You told me everything was fine. Mara spun toward her, eyes wild now. You told me everything was fine. You told me there were no outstanding issues. These exhibits show otherwise. I could hear it then. The shift in the room. People leaning forward. Someone behind me whispered. Oh my God. Judge Clean held up a hand. Mrs. Holloway, sit down. Linda didn't. Her voice rose brittle with panic. Rick, you did this. You planned this. I stayed seated. My hands rested on the table, fingers interlaced. I agreed to what you asked for. You hid this, she snapped. You hid it. No, I said. I stopped covering it up. That's when Mara screamed. It wasn't a theatrical scream. It wasn't loud for effect. It was the sound a professional makes when they realize the ground under their feet isn't ground at all. Your Honor, Mara shouted, papers shaking in her hands. She insisted on sole ownership. Sole. That means full responsibility. Every lien, every tax obligation, every compliance issue attached to these assets. She accepted them when she demanded everything. Judge Klein's jaw tightened. He leaned forward, scanning the top page of the exhibits. His expression changed from irritation to something colder, more focused. These documents indicate funds transferred from a protected educational account, he said slowly. An asset stored in locations not properly disclosed or permitted. Linda's mouth opened, then closed. That's not, those were temporary. Rick knew about those. Judge Klein looked up. Did he authorize them? She didn't answer. Mara pressed on desperation, edging her voice. Your Honor, my client believed these assets were clean. She was not made aware. Judge Klein cut her off. Counsel, your client certified these disclosures. This court takes non-disclosure seriously. Linda's face drained of color. The confidence she'd worn like armor cracked, then split. This is unfair, she said, her voice smaller now. I just wanted what I was owed. Mara turned on her. You wanted everything, she hissed, and now you have it. The judge sat back, steepling his fingers. This court will acknowledge the settlement as executed. However, given the information presented, I am ordering a review of financial disclosures and referring certain matters for further examination. The BA shifted closer to Linda's side of the room. Linda looked at me one last time, eyes searching for something. Regret maybe, or mercy. What about him? She said, pointing at me. He gets away with this. Judge Klein's voice was firm. Mr. Holloway relinquished ownership. Liability follows ownership. Silence fell again, deeper this time. I felt something loosen in my chest. Not triumph, relief. Because the weight I'd been holding up for years, quietly, stubbornly, had finally shifted off my shoulders. Linda sank back into her chair. Her phone buzzed on the table. Once, twice, she didn't look at it. Mara stared straight ahead, face pale, already calculating damage control that might not exist. Judge Clean struck the gavel once. Court is adjourned. People stood, chairs scraped. The room came back to life. I didn't look back as I walked out. Outside, the cold Ohio air hit my face sharp and clean. I took a deep breath and felt it fill my lungs. For the first time in a long time, the structure behind me wasn't mine to hold up anymore. The first night after the hearing, Evan and I ate dinner on the floor of our new place. It wasn't much. Just a small two-bedroom rental on the edge of curing beige walls, thin carpet, a faint smell of old paint, and lemon cleaner. The kind of place you don't brag about, but also don't feel ashamed to unlock. We sat cross-legged with paper plates balanced on our knees. Rotisserie chicken from Meyer, a loaf of bread, butter in one of those little plastic tubs. Evan took a bite and nodded. Not bad. I smiled. High praise. There was no echo here. No emptiness, pretending to be space. The rooms were smaller, but the air felt lighter, like a building after the bad load has been removed. A few days later, the calls started. I didn't answer them. At first, it was Linda's number lighting up my phone again and again. Then unknown numbers. Then a voicemail from Mara Keene that was all clip professionalism wrapped around panic. "Mr. Holloway, please return my call as soon as possible." I didn't. I had turned over ownership. Along with it, I'd turned over responsibility. That was the deal Linda wanted, and for once in her life, she was getting exactly what she asked for. Evan adjusted faster than I expected. He set up his desk by the window, went to class, picked up extra hours at the campus library. One evening, I came home to find him cooking pasta, reading instructions off his phone like it was a blueprint. "Look at you," I said. "All grown up," he shrugged. But I caught the hint of a smile. "Someone's got to feed us." On Sundays, we made pancakes again. The box kind. Too much butter. Some routine survived the wreck. Word got around town. Dayton isn't small when you want it to be big, but it's small enough when things go wrong. Linda's staging business stalled, then froze, then started to unravel. Vendors wanted payment. The storage facility flagged the unit. The tax letters came next. Certified mail. She posted less online. When she did, the photos were tighter, cropped, closer, trying to hide what wasn't there anymore. Once at the gas station, I ran into a guy I'd known for years. He glanced at me, then away. "Rough deal," he said quietly. "Yeah," I replied, "but it settled." And it was. I thought I'd feel more satisfaction, some big moment of victory. But what I felt instead was something steadier. Peace. Not the loud kind. The kind that shows up when you stop lying to yourself about what you're holding together. One evening, Evan and I sat on the couch, our couch this time, cheap but solid, watching the weather roll in on Channel 7. Thunderstorms moving across western Ohio. The meteorologist talked about pressure systems, unstable air. "Funny," Evan said, "how stuff builds up before it breaks." I nodded. "Yeah, it always does." He glanced at me. "You okay, Dad?" I thought about the house on Wrenwood Drive, the door frame with the pencil marks, the life I'd built there, and the life I still had sitting next to me. "I am," I said, and I meant it. Linda got the house, but I kept the home. She got the business, but I kept my name. If this story sounds familiar, if you've ever felt like you were holding up something that was already falling, take a moment, think about what really matters and what you're willing to let go. And if it helped to hear this, share it with someone who might need it. Or stick around. There are more stories like this, quiet ones about standing your ground the right way.